Welcome back to Two Keto Dudes. This is Carl Franklin from Connecticut in the United States. And in February of 2016, I put myself on a ketogenic diet to take control of my metabolism. In just 2.5 months, I managed to reverse all my markers of type 2 diabetes with diet alone. As of now, I'm 80 pounds lighter with no signs of diabetes or heart disease.
Hi, I'm Richard Morris in Canberra, Australia, and I've been on a ketogenic diet since April of 2014. When I started, I was very sick with complications from type 2 diabetes. Within 6 months of starting a ketogenic diet, all of my biomarkers of disease had disappeared. I've lost about 100 pounds. I've completely turned my health around.
And this show is a document of our experiences thriving for years in ketosis.
Yeah, and reversing diabetes.
And hopefully that might help a few people who are curious about this kind of dietary hacking.
We're not doctors. We don't want to give anyone any medical advice. We're actually a pair of hackers. But we are keen to share our own experience.
That's right.
We're really software developers, so we're not afraid of a little technical detail, are we, Carl?
No, sir.
Mm-hmm. We've done some research into our own deranged metabolisms and the science behind them, and we share studies that we found in the show notes.
And you'll probably work out pretty quickly that we're both foodies. Mm-hmm. We love to cook and we love to eat.
Yep.
In every episode, we both share a keto recipe that...
you might like.
So let's start podcast number 129, Ketofest Down Under with Jessica Turton.
Heard you say you're due for a little.
So, Richard, do we have any apologies or corrections from last week's show?
Let's see. Last week was 128. That was the Ketofest show.
Yeah.
We had a pair of fools on for guests. Who did we have? That's right. We had us.
Oh, it was us.
I'm
That's
not
right.
apologizing for us.
No, not at all.
I think it was a good show, so I think it's all good. But look, if you have any questions or any comments or things you disagree with, let us know. You know how to find us.
You certainly do. So let's revisit what a ketogenic diet is.
Sure.
A ketogenic diet puts you in a state of ketosis where you're burning fat for energy rather than glucose. Mm-hmm. And the way we did it is we ate 20 grams of carbs or less per day.
Yep.
Close to zero as you can get, but green leafy vegetables, some dairy, some eggs, all that kind of stuff.
You're going to have incidental carbs because even eggs have got some carbohydrates in them. Yeah.
As far as protein, that's moderate, and we use the 1 to 1.5 grams per kilogram of lean body mass equation.
Yeah, for me, I'm about 80 kilograms lean mass. I have between 80 and 120 grams of protein a day.
Right. And all of our energy we get from fat. Either the fat on our plate or the fat on our bodies.
Exactly.
Yeah, and if you're just starting keto and you want some more advice or you want some more detailed information, listen to our Starting Keto show at start.2keto.com. So, buddy, how was your week?
It's tiring, actually. As you probably know, or as our listeners may know, we're working on a Ketofest in Australia. And so I spent most of last week doing some photography of the event and signing deals with the venue. So we have the venue is all organised for Saturday the 16th. That's a Sunday in Canberra, Australia at the National Press Club.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So today I went over to the press club and had pork belly for lunch, and so good. And I went in back to chat to the chefs, and they actually sent me out an ice cream that was made with parsnip and truffles, but unfortunately it had sugar added to it, and I had a little taste, like half a teaspoon, just to get a feeling for the chef's flavor combinations. And really, it was delicious. I would love to see that with like an allulose or with a non-caloric sweetener.
Yeah.
But I went back and had a chat to the chefs and said, "Look, guys, this really was delicious, but we only have 20 grams of carbs a day maximum." And they both went, "Wow." So, I had a good week. And before I finish, I just want to mention that there is a UK meetup in Preston on the 18th of August, and we're going to put a link in the show notes. But you can also find this on the Ketogenic Forum. That's forums.2keto.com. You can go to the community/UK section, and you can see details about that. It's on the 18th of August at 1:30 p.m. at Solita. And the guy you want to chat to there is VJ, and he's organising a meetup of keto people. So
Very, very cool.
yeah, have fun. So how was your week, Carl?
My week was really good. It was my birthday week, and
Happy 51st, huh?
yeah, thanks. I gave myself a present. My wife would say I asked my wife permission to buy myself a present,
Okay.
and she did. It's a Traeger smoker / grill that uses wood pellets.
Nice.
So the problem with a lot of grills and smokers is precise temperature control, you know?
Right, yeah.
So what this does is it has a hopper that you fill with wood pellets, and they have to be food-grade wood pellets.
Sure.
Apple, mesquite, hickory, whatever. There's a whole bunch of them, bunch of types of wood that you can get. And then you basically have settings from smoke, which is like at 180 degrees Fahrenheit, all the way up to 450 degrees. And you can dial it in.
Nice.
Now, when it's on the very low level, it's just smoke.
Yeah.
You know, it's about as cold as it can be, but it's still about 180 Fahrenheit.
Right.
And then you can turn it up. And when you turn it up past a certain point, there's no smoke because the wood pellets are burning so quickly, and there's just no time for it.
Yeah. 180 Fahrenheit is about 80 Celsius. So it's just, you know, it's not boiling, but yeah.
So I got this originally because I was thinking I might want to cook picanha on it.
Right.
The rump cap steak, which is my recipe. And you'll have to wait and see how that turned out.
Okay. I love it.
Yeah.
It's a cliffhanger.
It's a cliffhanger. Yeah. Anyway, that's about it. I mean, I had a great week and a good birthday and ate some meat, and I'm going to share that recipe later.
Sounds like a good week.
Yeah. So let's give away some swag.
Yeah, every show we pick a lucky winner at random from the members of the 2 Keto Dude fan club.
Yes, and today we're giving away a treasure trove of stuff from vendors we like, all of which you can find at fanclub.2keto.com.
So, Carl, who's our winner this week?
This week's winner is Stacy Moneysmith.
Congratulations, Stacey.
Yeah, congratulations.
Let's tell everyone what Stacey has won.
Sure. Well, the first thing we're giving away is a 2 Keto Dudes coffee mug that says, "Keep calm and keto on."
Also, a signed copy of Lies My Doctor Told Me by Dr. Ken Berry, online at lies.2keto.com.
And a bottle of Stevia Sweet barbecue sauce, developed by a barbecue restaurant owner who plans to change the restaurant industry forever. Only 2 carbs per serving. Online at steviasweetbbq.com.
And a cheese-making kit from Wine and Whey. Pam Zorn gave everybody at Ketofest a kit so they can make their own fresh mozzarella. You can get yours online at wineandwhey.com. That's wineandwhey.com.
And a 6-ounce cup of beef bone broth concentrate from Birthright Nutrition. Just add water, heat, stir, sip, and enjoy. Jam-packed with good stuff. More at birthrightnutrition.com.
We're also giving away a bottle of Remag Magnesium Solution developed by Dr. Carolyn Dean, along with a copy of her protocol and the Keto and Magnesium Manifesto. That was presented at Ketofest 2018. You can find that online at magmiracle.com. That's magmiracle.com.
We're also giving away a big bottle of fasting drops from Keto Chow. It's a well-formulated blend of electrolytes. You just drop a little in your water and fasting will be a breeze. Online at fastingdrops.2keto.com.
And a bottle of Sated RTD. Now, 1 chocolate, 1 vanilla, online at sated, sated.com/2kf-RTD.
And from Keto & Company, a sampler 6-pack, a bag of brownies, a bag each of 4 flavored cauliflower rices, and a bag of flatbread. Online at ketoand.co.
And if you don't want to wait to win some swag, you can buy all sorts of it online at gear.2keto.com.
And that brings us squarely to a little section we call
Mail! No teenagers this week. So what you got, Carl?
Well, here's a message that was written in the ketogenic forums a few days ago in the newbies section. And this is from Martha. And Martha says, feeling fed up, but I know I can't quit. No other options, but really deflated. Help! And Martha says, I started keto June 24th. My A1C was 5.5, but that's after I'd worked hard without knowing keto existed. trying to adjust my diet to remove sugar and starches anyway over the past couple of years.
Nice.
Due to being told I was pre-diabetic and diagnosed with PCOS 2 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
I listened to Two Keto Dudes religiously.
G'day, Martha.
Yeah. I also devour anything written or recorded by Jason Fung and Megan Ramos.
Mm-hmm.
I've been doing IF for a few weeks now, fasting for 20 hours, eating one meal a day for 4 hours, with my feeding window closing at 6 p.m., but I rarely eat after 5 p.m. Slowly, I saw my weight come down by another 2.2 pounds.
About a kilo. Yep.
After my initial 5 kilo loss, 11-ish pound loss after starting keto on June 24th.
Nice.
Then plateauing 2 weeks in. I've done 2 36-hour fasts over the last 2 weeks. When doing one meal a day, I have trouble eating more than 800 to 900 calories in one feed without feeling seriously ill. And on feast days, I have trouble going over 1,500 calories without feeling like I'm going to throw up. I've never been a big eater. I'm consistently eating 75 to 80% fat, and carbs are rarely over 15 grams a day, 1 to 5%. I'm careful with protein. I started doing a 20K bike ride once a week. A disciple of Richard?
Yep.
And I keep my heart rate in endurance zone or fat burning. I'm moderately active daily anyway, running around after 2 kids and working with children at work also. Sometimes I have long stints at a desk, but it's balanced out. I felt great on Saturday after losing approximately another 3.5 pounds after my 36-hour fast this week. But to my horror, the scale today says I put this weight back on over 2 days on the weekend, plus more, around 5 pounds total. This is after I finished my 36-hour fast on Friday and a 20K ride on Sunday. All the weight I thought my fast finally helped me lose is back, plus more. This seemed to happen the moment I went back to a 16-8 window over the weekend and attempting to feast, still keto, by increasing my intake to over 1,500 on Saturday and Sunday after hearing from Megan Ramos on Two Keto Dudes, the Switching It Up show, how important it is to feast when not fasting.
Sure is.
I am so deflated. I don't know what more to do. I don't want to give up on this, but it's so frustrating. I had lost almost 6 kilos since starting keto lifestyle back in June, with starting weight of 91 kilograms. My goal weight is 68 kilograms, so I feel like this is so slow going when I hear others losing 20 pounds in 2 weeks. I started doing the 20 and 4 IF for the last few weeks, trying to break the plateau, then did 2 36 hours this week, and the week before I finally lost 1.5 kilos. I've been keeping calm and ketoing on, but now all that weight is back again, plus the... You can just see she's really getting frustrated here.
Yeah.
So, the rest of it is that she's just started another 36-hour fast, and she's 13 hours in, feeling really so sick of it all. But she says, I feel I have no other options but to keep going. I guess I'm just looking for some hope to bolster me.
Right.
And, I don't know what advice you would give her, but the advice that everybody else gave her was seemingly spot on to me, which is, don't look at the scale, throw your scale away. And I get the feeling that she is sort of calorically restricting, number one.
Yeah, absolutely she is.
Number two, she's exercising, which, is going to build muscle mass, which, as we know, is denser than fat.
Well, it's not only that. She's exercising, and that's adding a caloric deficit to her caloric balance. So it's making her deficit, her calorie restriction, even worse. Here's the thing. We weigh what our bodies choose to weigh given their homeostasis. And
right.
Basically they get inputs from your environment that tells them what the energy they can expect. And when you have a lot of carbohydrates in your diet, you derange that. So your body sets its homeostasis at 100 pounds higher, and so that's really the magic of keto is allowing your body to rebalance its homeostasis without the derangement of high levels of insulin all the time.
Yeah.
And so that's the trick of keto. you really can't lean in much further than not eating carbs. Fair enough. You can fast for 3 days or 5 days or what have you. You can do extra exercise. You can do an extra 20K bike ride. You can reduce the amount of calories that you're eating, and those things will help you lose weight in the short term, but they don't reset your energy homeostasis of your body. That's up to your body to determine, given the environmental inputs, where it's going to be. So my advice, and really, you're in a very similar situation to where Julie was when we first started. You're only about 6 weeks in, so you're only just fat adapted. And Jules didn't lose a lot of weight in the first 6 weeks. She took about 18 months. In the end, she lost more weight in kilograms than I lost in that first 18 months, but I lost all of mine in like the first three to 5 months. And she took a good 18 months and she was coming from 95 kilos. Martha's coming from 91, and Jules ended up at 61, and Martha's aiming to get to 68. So, you're in a similar situation. You just have to be kind to your body. You have to make sure it gets energy. You have to make sure that you're not hungry. And you don't have to exercise if you don't feel like exercising. If you want to exercise, great, go for it, do it. But you're not going to lose weight faster by doing more exercise. That's not how it works, because exercise is stress. And if you give your body stress, it's going to save a little bit extra for that rainy day because it's under a bit of stress.
And that's also going to raise insulin levels, isn't it?
Sure, absolutely. I mean, my advice is keep calm and keto on. Really, it will, in most cases, once you are happy and comfortable and really starting to enjoy the lifestyle, the weight seems to flow off. At least that was my experience. That's Julie's experience as well. And one of our friends, Karen, gained weight for the first 6 weeks. And was extremely frustrated. And then it was only when she sort of chilled out a bit that all of a sudden the weight started coming off.
Yep. So there you go. Just keep calm keto on. Don't worry about the scale. Just throw it away. Seriously. Yeah. It's not helpful.
Well, if you're doing a 20K bike ride, you could be going up or down 4 kilograms just in water, just in hydration. Yeah. The scale is not going to be giving you useful information, I'm afraid.
So that's the mail that I read. What do you got today?
Oh, I've got a long one as well. I'm sorry. This will be a decent one. This is a message, and it comes from Brian, and he actually sent this email to us directly. And Brian says, "Hi guys, I've heard you say that there are dozens of studies that have shown saturated fat is not linked to heart disease. How can this be true if 25% of the population has at least one genetic E4 allele?" That's the ApoE4, making them more susceptible to heart disease when consuming saturated fat. Wouldn't that large percentage of the population skew the data towards a higher incidence of heart disease with the consumption of saturated fat? I'm confused. And I responded to Brian, and basically I sent him a link to the end of the Zurich conference. And this was, you might remember I mentioned it in the podcast with Sarah Halberg, but Darius Mossafarian gave a really good presentation on basically giving a full-throated defense of epidemiology. And he's basically said we can only afford to observe a biomarker like, say, blood pressure being associated with cardiovascular disease, and then look at an association between a nutrient intake like that of salt being associated with blood pressure, and then draw the conclusion that the evidence shows that salt intake increases cardiovascular disease. Because if salt increases blood pressure and blood pressure going up increases cardiovascular disease risk, then you should be able to infer that eating more salt means you have more cardiovascular disease. And the next presenter, Salim Youssef, actually contradicted that, because he actually did a study into looking into how much salt people ate and how much cardiovascular disease they had. And in fact, in some cases, the heart disease, there was no association, and people who ate more salt had less stroke. So, some of the risk went down. So, and he made the point that you can't really make the association between nutrient, biomarker, and disease like that. My question at the time to both of them was to address the elephant in the room, and that is saturated fat. Dr. Youssef's study actually showed that there was no association between saturated fat and cardiovascular disease risk, but Dr. Mossafarian and Dr. Willett and a lot of other people have made the link between An increase in saturated fat causes an increase in LDL, and an increase in LDL has a very weak association with an increase in cardiovascular disease. And so they've made the assumption that increasing saturated fat increases cardiovascular disease. But Dr. Yusuf found that there was absolutely no association between the two. But of course, our dietary guidelines still warn us to reduce all saturated fat intake because it increases the risk of cardiovascular disease. Drilling into this, what has been shown is that middle-aged men who have cardiovascular disease have a slightly elevated LDL-C, that is, cholesterol carried by LDL particles is slightly elevated. It's not by a great amount. If you have two populations and one group has high LDL-C and group 2 has normal LDL-C, and you wait to see who gets cardiovascular disease, the number from group 1, which is the group that has a high LDL-C, their number is about 8% higher, people getting cardiovascular disease, than the number in group 1. It's small, but it's significant. I don't know the actual underlying data because it's not in the Framingham study that I have at hand, but the difference might be similar to the difference between 12 people from 1,000 in Group A in the years that they were tracked having cardiovascular disease and 11 people from Group B. 12 to 11, the difference is 8%. But if the entire population is in 1,000, then that's a very small, weak association.
Yeah.
The other thing that's been shown is that if you increase intake of saturated fat in the diet, then that increases the number of LDL particles, and that's a much larger association. The number in Group 1 who eats a lot of saturated fat, who have high LDL, is 300% higher than the number in Group 2. That's a threefold increase. Okay, so that's a much larger effect, and you can say, something like 21 people from the 1,000 in Group A having more LDL particles and 7 in the 1,000 people from Group B having less LDL particles, having heart attacks. But again, I don't know the absolute numbers, but the effect is stronger because it's a threefold effect. And, you can say that there is a causal relationship between eating saturated fat and having more LDL particles. And in the 70s, we saw all of that and we said, right, well, we need to lower saturated fat to lower cardiovascular disease. And then every study we attempted to test that hypothesis refused to give us the result that we expected. A majority of experts are still holding out for the study that will finally show them to have been correct all along. So anyway, let's go over the logic. Some people who eat more saturated fat get more LDL particles, and some people with more LDL particles usually have more LDL cholesterol, and some people with higher LDL get more cardiovascular disease than average. To start off with, we're talking about really small effects, linking LDL-C with cardiovascular disease risk. Unless the effect is over 200%, over twofold increase, you really can't say that high LDL-C causes cardiovascular disease.
Right.
We can't tell if cardiovascular disease causes high LDL-C or high LDL-C causes cardiovascular disease, or both are caused by a third factor. You can probably, however, say that the increased saturated fat intake causes some increased LDL particle numbers. That's a 300% association. So that's sufficient to infer causation from the effect size.
Right, but just because it increases LDL doesn't mean that it increases your chances of heart disease, because there isn't a clear correlation there.
Well, we don't even know if it's the same LDL. Well, in fact, we actually know that it's not the same LDL because
that's right.
Ronald Krauss has actually shown this. It's a small dense LDL that's associated with cardiovascular disease, and it's the large buoyant that's associated with eating saturated fat. That's why there's no underlying association. But anyway, Brian's question was not really about cardiovascular disease. He inferred that the problem with saturated fat with his ApoE status, this is his genetic alleles that make his ApoE particles.
So ApoE, what is that? What does that stand for? Well,
it's one of the alleles that we use to make a particle called ApoE, and there are three common variants. We can have E2, E3, and E4. And most people have E3, something like 70% of all people have E3. And we get one from mum and one from dad, so we have two. So for example, I'm E3. I got an E3 from mum and an E3 from dad. That's the most common form of ApoE particle.
Okay.
But there's a type of particle called ApoE4. And that's much rarer. And people who have an ApoE4, they're not at risk from cardiovascular disease. They're at risk for Alzheimer's disease. And this is why it's critical. And people who have 1E3 and 1E4, so they have 1E3 like me, but they have the higher risk one, they're at a 3-fold greater risk of Alzheimer's disease than people who have 2E3s. And people who have 2E4s are a 15 times greater risk. So, you can test yourself, and Brian has done this. He has an E3 and an E4. So he has a 3-fold greater risk of Alzheimer's disease than I have with my E3, E3.
But it's also important to say that, and you might be getting around to this, that just because you have a genetic predisposition towards something doesn't mean that's your fate.
Right. This is the argument about genotype and phenotype. Genotype says this is the genes that you have. Phenotype says this is how you got to express those genes. And in the case of people who eat a high carbohydrate diet, if they have a higher risk for Alzheimer's disease based on their ApoE status, they're more likely to have Alzheimer's. But people who have a low carbohydrate diet don't have that risk. So, if you have E4, you really want to be eating a low carbohydrate diet because that flatlines all of your Alzheimer's risks. So, and there's good news for E4 carriers is that E4 also confers some advantage to immune function. So you're actually in a very good position if you have E4, as long as you know not to eat carbs.
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah, but to sum up, the evidence has failed to show a saturated fat is a risk to cardiovascular disease. There may be some risk of eating saturated fat if you have an E4 and eat a high-carb diet. I really don't know if that is true for people eating ketogenically.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm really glad that one of us is smart enough to explain that. Thank you.
I'm not sure that I did fully explain it, but look, if you have any questions, Brian, you know where we are.
All right. Well, that brings us to the content part of this show. Yeah. Enough chit-chat. Let's actually hear an excellent interview that you, Richard, did with Jessica Turton.
Yeah, that's right. I did that in Thredbo 2 weeks ago. We had a low-carb conference with Low Carb Down Under in Thredbo, and Jessica Turton has actually been on our show before. I interviewed her last time in Perth, and she's a scientist and a dietitian. And what's more, she's a dietitian who is using science to teach other dietitians how they can get around the Dietitians Association of Australia dietary guidelines to prescribe ketogenic and low-carb diets to people who have type 2 diabetes.
Yeah, she is our kind of dietitian.
She sure is.
Yeah. All right, let's roll that recording.
Okay, I'm in Low Carb Thredbo. This is a conference at a ski resort, which is unusual for low-carb people. No, it's not really. We do it all the time because a lot of us are skiers. So this conference is at Low Carb Thredbo, which is in the Australian Alps, and the noise in the background will be the sound of a thriving resort on powder day because it's actually snowing powder in Australia. So I'm here with Jessica Turton. We spoke to Jess a couple of months ago at Low Carb Perth. Jessica, say hello to everyone.
Hello, everybody. And hello, Richard. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. So tell me, you did a presentation at Perth and we didn't get the audio, so we redid the presentation today, and Low Carb Down Under will be publishing that video. Yeah. But tell us a little bit about your presentation in Perth. That was on a new paper you just published.
Yeah, so the one that I did in Perth, when I did the presentation the day before, actually, we were told that our systematic review that we did for low carbohydrate diets on type 1 diabetes was going to be published. So I couldn't actually talk about that as much as I wanted to. So it was almost good in a way that it didn't get recorded. So I had the opportunity to do the talk again here at Thredbo. And I was able to talk about all this, like a few really high quality recent systematic reviews that have been done, looking at low carbohydrate diets for obesity, for type 2 diabetes, for cardiovascular disease risk, and also my one for type 1 diabetes, and present the evidence on low carb for these clinical conditions and really present this as an evidence-based approach. Right. And so I'm really excited for that to get out there for other practitioners as well.
Well, certainly for other dietitians. It's very important, really, for dietetics, the practice and evidence-based approach is like critical to dietitians. Yes. Yeah. So it's very important to put the evidence for a low-carb diet, if there is any evidence, and you're able to collect quite a lot of evidence for that. So I guess the first thing is, have you have you heard back from other dietitians who've seen your work?
About my systematic review. So basically the only thing I've heard in terms of other dietitians referring to my systematic review is that not in the light I would have expected it to be referred to, but one dietitian, and we won't name names because we don't do that here,
No, we don't.
but one dietitian actually referenced my paper during a conference to other dietitians and was like, see, there's no evidence for low carbohydrate diets and type 1 diabetes.
You're kidding.
And she took
That's the opposite of your conclusion.
Well, her conclusion from my conclusion just didn't make any sense. So basically my conclusion has a point in there that says the evidence is inconclusive, and that's true because you can't just get a few little papers together and be like, right, this is what we need to do for the whole population. But inconclusive does not mean ineffective, and she was sort of using it and going, see, it's ineffective, we should not be using low carb diets for type 1. But my whole review, all she needed to do was look at the results table and see that we included 9 studies. No, they weren't amazing studies, but they were 9 studies.
There's not a lot of amazing RCTs in type 1 diabetics,
well,
is there?
no, there's no evidence for the high carb approach. So this is pretty much like, what we're going for the low carb approach. And there's, 9 studies is okay. And every single one of those studies had at least one significant difference in an outcome after the low carb diet in a positive direction. So there were no studies that showed any negative side effects or any negative results. And so I don't see how that would mean ineffective. We had one trial in there that had a drop of HbA1c. It was from 9.7 to 7.2 or something in 5 months.
That's incredible.
And so how can you say that it's just blanket ineffective?
I think another conclusion that you could take from that study is that there are no studies that show it's not effective.
Correct.
I mean, that really is there's not a lot of studies, but every single one that you were able to find in your systematic review showed
some sort of effect. Yeah. And the problem is these days is, particularly with systematic reviews and this whole evidence-based practice approach, I believe evidence-based practice is so important, but I think people are just not reviewing the evidence properly.
Right.
And I believe that, this example that I used just before where this person's going straight to my conclusions and going, see, I think what practitioners really need to do is, use a systematic review as a tool to look at individual studies and to find individual studies. So I don't think we should necessarily be relying on systematic reviews and never looking at individual studies.
As a conclusion, we need to use that as a guideline, a map, if you will, to interesting studies.
So it's like a summary of the evidence, but it shouldn't be the be-all and end-all because, the example I use is type 2 diabetes. And we've recently had this amazing trial from Verta Health looking at type 2 diabetes, and it showed amazing results. But that wasn't a randomized controlled trial. So systematic reviews aren't going to include the Verta Health trial. And if we're only solely looking at systematic reviews of randomized controlled trials, we're going to lose really good evidence like the Verta Health study, which showed a 60% reversal in type 2 diabetes.
And the outcomes were remarkable. Something like 94% of people who came into the study on insulin were able to get off their insulin entirely of type 2 diabetics. So, that's remarkable. And it had an 87% compliance.
Amazing.
Amazing. The point that I was making to Sarah Hallberg was that even the eat all the chocolate you want diet doesn't have an 87% compliance because Cadbury's in Tasmania.
Or eat all the meat you want diet.
That's right.
We tried to do that last night.
We went to a churrascaria in Thredbo, and both Jessica and I have a little bit of a meat coma right now.
But we love it. We're happy about that.
But 87% compliance for a complicated diet, but one that reverses diabetes and is provably able to reverse diabetes. It was a controlled trial because they had a control group. It wasn't randomized, but apparently one of their problems, Sarah Hallberg said, one of the problems was that people who were on the control arm, because it was all happening in one town, people on the control arm were finding out about the people on the intervention arm having such success, and they were jumping ship. And they were watching what the people on the intervention arm ate and following them. So that was one of the unfortunate outcomes. But it still was a controlled trial. It was a clinical trial.
Yeah, it was a clinical trial, and it was a very, very, very important trial, I think, and it was one that a lot of practitioners and I think dietitians are looking at going, oh, maybe this low carb thing isn't so bad.
Right.
And so I think that's the key. So part of my research going forward and my practice as a dietitian is to try and see if we can improve the translational capacity of the systematic, all the evidence on low carb diets that's already available, but also the new trials coming through. So there's no point me going off and doing a PhD and doing a primary clinical trial looking at low carb diets for type 1 if no dietitian is ever going to look at it or care about it.
Sure.
So I need to sort of look at both angles, and I need to go, okay, yes, we need the evidence, but we also need to help that evidence translate into practice.
So in terms of translatable, you want to put together a protocol that dietitians can use for a ketogenic or low-carb diet?
Yes, that would be the end goal, an evidence-based protocol, and that would be a collaboration with some other PhD students as well. But that would be part of my PhD project, and it is planned at the moment. It is planned to be a protocol that anyone can look at. So whether it's a dietitian, a doctor, or just a fellow researcher who wants to do an intervention on low-carb diets, and they can say, okay, well, what population do I have? What education do I need to do? How strict do we need to go on carbohydrates? What other things are involved? Because it's not all about carbohydrates. It's about fat quality. It's about other things too. And so we want to have like a protocol based on all the scientific literature we have at the moment. So to get to that protocol is going to be a lot of work. We're not just going to sit down tomorrow and write one. No. But we plan to do multiple systematic reviews. So I've already done the systematic review for type 1 diabetes, and I did it in a way where I included all study designs, and I was very, very inclusive. So it was basically looking at the results before the low-carb diet and the results after the low-carb diet. And I want to do that again with type 2 diabetes, with obesity, and with cancer. Those reviews have already been done. They've only been done for randomized control trials. Right. So all they're ever doing is comparing a low-carb diet with a high-carb diet, which is also useful. I'm not saying that's not useful. No.
But there exist studies that do that on the type 2 side of things. There wasn't anything on type 1. There wasn't any randomized controlled trial that you could include in your systematic review.
Well, there were two, but they weren't very good.
Okay. But I mean, that's not enough to be able to do a systematic review. So,
not a meta-analysis,
But by pulling in all of these other studies, some of them were N of 1s. I mean, one of them was Dr. Richard Bernstein's personal N of 1 study that he published, and so that was included. And so normally, traditionally, we're told to ignore the anecdote, ignore the N of 1s because they're easily confounded. There's lots of reasons why, but when that's the only real evidence, that shows at least that one person it worked for, and then now the question is, how did it work? Did it really work? How do you know that? You test it. So
exactly.
That's really the next stage after your first paper. The next stage is for some research lab to pick it up and say, we need to do a randomized controlled trial looking at these things. And I think soon after you publish your paper, there was a trial done by, or actually it was a retrospective review done by David Ludwig on the type 1 grit community.
Yeah, so he surveyed the type 1 grit community, which is basically a supportive community of people on Facebook who are following the Dr. Richard Bernstein approach, which is a low carbohydrate diet for type 1 diabetes management. And this group is fantastic. So I love, watching this group on Facebook because they provide each other with such support and no one's judging each other, and they're coming in with their stories, their personal stories about having type 1 or their child having type 1, and they're desperate for answers, and they're coming to this Facebook group after seeing all their primary healthcare practitioners and going, no one's helping me, no one's supporting me, or they've heard about the low carb diet and they want to use it but they can't get that support still. And so we've got thousands of people in this group, and the type 1 grit study showed they had very, very tight control, very, very good control of their blood sugars. Phenomenal. Well, that was the word that was used. And we just don't really see that with type 1 diabetes. I think the data at the moment is showing that about 84% of people with type 1 diabetes have an HbA1c over 7%.
Wow.
And the type 1 gritters had...
84%? Wow.
Yeah, yeah. So that might be slightly old data now, but it was still, I think, about 2014.
Sure.
But people in type 1 group, they were under 6%, weren't they, mostly, which is almost normal blood sugar control.
A lot of them are 4.8 to 5.2 range.
Exactly.
Which is normal. I mean, that's a normal range.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And I think that sort of research is remarkable. But when we look at evidence-based practice and health practitioners, a lot of people would look at that and be like, oh, you know, that's not proper research. That's
just
not
some
proper
people
science.
in a Facebook group.
That's just people in a Facebook group. That's not controlled. And to an extent, I get that. But also to an extent, I feel like, well, we can't just ignore that.
No.
We can't ignore it and just pretend it didn't happen.
No. Well, David Ludwig is a professor of endocrinology and nutrition. He's the ideal person to take both of those, to bridge both of those worlds, from Harvard. I mean, he's not nobody, and and Boston Children's College, and he is the ideal person to do that. He went back to the physicians of these type 1 grit participants and got their actual lab data. So it's not like that lab data has passed through several hands and is anecdotal. It's going back to their actual lab results. And so he knew that, and in a few cases, I think he actually had the HbA1c data from before the intervention.
So he had some longitudinal data in there, which is really exciting because I can include that in my next systematic review. So as part of my PhD, I will be doing an update on my type 1 diabetes systematic review, which is cool because I feel like now with the type 1 grit study and my review being published, we have a lot more people and researchers out there going, you know, maybe we should do more research in this area, which is exactly what I wanted the review to sort of help happen is more research happening into this area because, you know, I'm not going to sit back and be like, oh yes, low carb diets are the be all and end all for type 1 diabetes because I genuinely think we do need more research and we need to know, okay, well, how strict should they be carbohydrate restricting if it is effective?
Yeah, how low carb?
Low carb do they need to go?
The point you made in your presentation yesterday is that low carb ranges from anything below 45% of energy intake to, you know, 5 to 10 grams a day. And that's a big range.
It's a massive range and so many different diets can be constructed within that low carb paradigm. And so basically what I was saying in my presentation is that in the scientific literature, there is no sort of strict definition of low carb diet. So if you do a search for low carb diets, you could get anything below 45% total energy. So you could get a low carb diet that's 44% total energy intake as carbohydrate. And they're like, look at our low carb diet. And so when Kieran and I were doing our systematic review, we were sort of saying we need
Kieran Rooney from University of Sydney.
I was saying we actually do need to still capture those studies because it would be interesting to see how different levels of carbohydrate restriction affect people's results. You know, so some previous work has shown that for type 2 diabetes or metabolic syndrome, just restricting by, you know, if you restrict to 130 grams of carbs per day, that actually doesn't get you any results potentially if you're depending on what you're looking at, maybe weight, for example.
Sure. As a proxy or a biomarker for type 2 diabetes remission, weight loss can be considered, you know.
But if you then push those same cohort of people down to a 50 gram of carbohydrate intake per day or a 20 gram of carbohydrate intake, you may see vastly different results. And so we thought, you know, we can't have these studies out there being like, oh, look how bad low carb diets are.
Sure, if they're 44%.
If they're 44% total energy. So we're like, we need to include them and we need to talk about them and we need to give them a label. So if there was any diet between 26% total energy intake and 45% total energy intake from carbohydrate, we called them false low carb diet studies.
Excellent.
But I think it was exciting to include them actually in our review because some of them actually showed results. So there was one there that reduced carbohydrate to 150 grams per day roughly, and they were able to drop HbA1c by almost 2%. So
2 percentage points. So
2 percentage points. So yes, we don't know, okay, for type 1 diabetes, is 20 grams per day the be all and end all? Is 50 grams per day the be all and end all? And that's why we need more research to confirm. And I think this brings us back to the whole role of dietitians. And I think dietitians are very scared of low carb because they think that low carb means no carb. And that is certainly not the case. And that's why I really hope we get more and more dietitians at these conferences because they'll get to meet people that are actually living this way and doing this and thriving, but also be able to learn how to evaluate the literature a little bit better. Because in a lot of these studies I was looking at, I mean, they're very, very healthy, lots of vegetables. I mean, a lot of variety in these interventions that are low carb. Yeah. And I just think that
a dietitian wouldn't consider a lot of these diets to be a quote unquote a priori bad diet.
No, exactly.
Full of leafy greens and full of healthy fats,
The fact that we're labeling them low carb or we're labeling them ketogenic, I think is what's scaring some dietitians away.
Right. Interesting.
I think if the dietitians actually saw what people were eating in a day, they'd be like, oh, that's fantastic. That's great. Yeah. But it's all this labeling that's going on that maybe is driving them away. I don't know.
So your advice to dietitians who are listening to this is really to look at the nutritional content of low carb diets.
Yeah, so if you're looking at a primary intervention study, for example, or a systematic review, go to the primary intervention study, go to the methods section and look at what they've actually recommending their participants to eat. Right. And look at how the low carbohydrate diet is being formulated. And yes, if they're giving them these awful fake food shakes, then that may not be something you'll ever recommend, and that's fine. Right. But if they're giving them a diet that includes a lot of variety, a lot of balance, and they're looking at micronutrient adequacy as well, then that's something that I think all dietitians would agree, okay, this is completely safe and it's effective. And we know that there was a recent paper by Rebecca Johnson, I think Karen Zinn and Amy Rush published showing that, yes, you can create a low carbohydrate diet that meets all the nutrient targets, so all the recommended daily intakes for the main micronutrients.
Nutrient-dense food,
Yeah, and I think that's the big thing that dietitians are concerned about. So we get taught a quick and easy way to make sure that an individual is meeting their micronutrient intake is to compare their current food intake with the food groups.
Right.
So, for example, if someone isn't eating any dairy, you can really quickly in 5 minutes or in 5 seconds assume that they're low in calcium.
Okay.
So that it was just a really quick way for dietitians to be like, okay, let's help people get their major micronutrients. And I think it's actually a cool system, but it's designed for a high carbohydrate diet.
Right.
So then, if they're not
so
eating...
many things are designed for a high carbohydrate diet.
Exactly.
All of our nutrient requirements, for example, vitamin C. Vitamin C competes with glucose to get into cells. And so when you have a diet that is high in glucose, like a 60% of your energy is coming from carbohydrates, you've got a lot of glucose in your blood system. You can't get much vitamin C into your cells, so you have to have more vitamin C. And so all of these things are our assumptions about how much vitamin C a person needs change when they go low carb. And a dietitian might look at a low carb diet and think, oh, there's no vitamin C in it. If they can't eat fruit, how can this person not get scurvy? And the simple fact of it is that capsicums have more vitamin C in them than oranges and have very little glucose.
Meat has vitamin C in it too, I've learned.
Well, especially raw liver. If you can tolerate raw liver, it's absolutely chock-packed because that's where we store our vitamin C,
If you can tolerate, you're like, I hate liver. Exactly. No, you're right. And that's the thing. I think and this is part of my goal in my PhD, when I say I'm thinking about a protocol to help other people do low carb diets, it's kind of like we need these food groups, this sort of system to help people analyze or help the dietitians analyze people's low carb diets.
Right.
I think there's just a lack of training and a lack of awareness in this low carb diet realm. And I think practitioners might just be a little bit afraid. So they, if their patient comes in and they're on a low carb diet, the way that dietitian safely knows how to manage that person is a high carb diet.
Yes.
So that's why they're not going to be supportive of the low carb diet. And I think we, as a community that sort of are aware and understand low carbohydrate diets, need to help those practitioners who want help to support their patients.
Yeah.
And I think, part of my goals in life as a health practitioner is to really spread the evidence and bring the evidence to the surface. So, number one, health practitioners aren't scared to use low carbohydrate diets, but also 2, actually help them in doing a
Have
low
some
carbohydrate
tools.
diet, have tools, because we know that education is super important. So you can't just say to Joe Blow down the street and just be like, oh, reduce your carbs to 20 grams per day. All right, goodbye. You need to give this person education. You need to give them constant support. And they may need micronutrient supplementation. They may need specific focus on certain foods. They may need their bloods analyzed every 3 months to ensure everything else is functioning optimally. So carbohydrates aren't everything. There's so much involved. And I think with dietitians wanting to learn more about this, there are resources out there. And I think Low Carb Down Under are putting out fantastic resources that I think are like, you couldn't really get any more evidence-based than that, because the speakers that they're having on their YouTube channel are either scientists, so they're either academics, or they're practitioners, so they've been working in the field, or they're individuals who have been affected by these conditions that we as health practitioners are trying to manage. And so
that's me.
That's
Listeners,
you.
That's
you.
I'm type 2 diabetic, and reversed my own diabetes, and then realised that there are other diabetics out there who are in trouble who didn't have access to the same information I did, and so I just went live and just started publicising it. So yesterday in your presentation, you mentioned the Australian Dietary Guidelines are specific to healthy people. And you gave an interesting technique that a dietitian could use to apply the Australian Dietary Guidelines, or to, in the case of somebody who is metabolically damaged, choose to divert slightly from the guidelines to an intervention that has a better chance of helping them. So talk a little bit about that as a technique for dietitians to work within the structure, but also to be able to fine-tune the intervention for a customer.
Yeah, so you're right. So the Australian Dietary Guidelines were never tested on people with medical conditions. So I think we spoke about this in our last interview. If you had any risk factors for disease, or if you had any disease, you would just be kicked out of the studies that they used to support the evidence for the dietary guidelines. So basically, as a dietitian, we're actually trained in something called medical nutrition therapy.
Okay.
And so, we go to uni for 5 years, and I think a lot of people don't even know what dietitians do. I know a few doctors that I even work with sort of just come up to me every now and then like, what do dietitians do? And it's interesting that people don't know, and I think people do just assume we give out the Australian Dietary Guidelines to every single person. And I would hate to think that dietitians are doing that, because we are trained in so much more than that. So basically what I said in the presentation, I went through an example of what medical nutrition therapy is, and how the sort of assessment you would formulate to then create an intervention that's going to be effective for that patient. So basically what I do, the whole first part of a consult is information gathering. So you would collect information on their medical conditions, so their past and previous active and previous medical conditions. And people have lots of medical conditions. Lots. You would also look at family history as well, because that's super important, especially for younger people, to try and work out, have they got insulin resistance in the family, type 2 diabetes in the family, cardiovascular disease, autoimmune conditions? Like, you need to work those things out too. You also ask about social circumstances, so their stress levels at work. Are they sleeping well? What is their idea of sleeping well? Because we know that poor sleep is going to increase your risk of high glucose and insulin resistance. We also ask if they can cook, because that's important too. Like, who do they live with? Are these people going to be supportive? We also look at their exercise. We look at biochemistry, so HDL cholesterol, HbA1c, insulin, all of those types of things. We ask about signs and symptoms of micronutrient deficiencies, so energy levels, muscle cramping, all of those other types of things which might indicate to us, maybe they need a bit more B12, or maybe they need a bit more sodium or something like that, and so on and so forth. So my consults are usually like an hour long at the beginning, because you really have to collect all this information. And then basically all of that information funnels into these a set of nutrition diagnoses. So it's basically the individual's main nutrition-related problems. So you might come up with 1, you might come up with 3, you might come up with 5 or 10.
Yeah.
So this person, based on everything they've told you, you sort of put together the dots and go, okay, what are the main nutrition-related problems? And then what you do is you talk to the patient, and together with the patient, you prioritize which ones they want to work on first. So it's basically, if I give an example, if we had someone come in and, they were having progressive weight gain around their midsection, they had a family history of type 2 diabetes, let's say they had high blood pressure, high stressful job, and they were showing all these signs of insulin resistance, and their personal goal was to lose weight, then one of the main nutrition-related problems, after looking at their dietary intake and their supplements and all those things as well, might be excessive carbohydrate intake.
Yes.
And if the person really wants to lose weight and you talk to them about the effect of carbohydrates on weight and insulin, all those types of things, you and the patient might go, right, we're going to prioritize that as number 1.
Yeah.
So really the most important thing for that person going forward for the next couple of weeks is reducing carbohydrate. And reducing carbohydrate is something you would still work out with them. How far do you want to reduce? Do you want to get results quickly, or do you want to just go slow? Like all of these things you need to talk to the patient with, because you're not holding their hand and like picking things out of the fridge for them at home. They've got to do it.
Exactly. That's the thing. They do all the hard work.
Exactly. So if you just talk to them about it, you'll find, they want to do this or they don't want to do this. And sometimes people don't want to reduce carbohydrates straight away, even off the education you give them. And there's always other things. So another example from the example I just gave, if this person has high stress levels, something I would look at then is magnesium intake.
Okay.
Because sometimes poor stress management can be a reflection of inadequate magnesium intake.
Right.
And then inadequate magnesium intake can cause more stress in that person's life.
Right.
So it's a flow-on effect. So I believe that to be very, very important too. And things like vitamin B12, iron, we look at all of those things. And basically that helps us to formulate the intervention. So now we've got an intervention we're not labeling as anything. We're just going, this intervention is based on this person's main nutrition-related problems, and we've formulated this personalized intervention together. So myself and the patient have spoken about this. We're going to write a letter to the doctor. Everyone's involved. Everyone's happy.
Wonderful, yeah.
And so what you do then is you see that person every month or every couple of weeks, and, every now and then you get their doctors to run some blood tests, and you take their weight, you take their waist circumference, you ask them how they're feeling. Are they enjoying it? Are they doing the diet?
Yeah.
Do they need help? And then all of those things tell you, is the intervention you gave to that patient effective? Is it working, or is it not working?
Right.
If it's not working, you change your approach, or you prioritize something else.
Yeah.
And you keep tweaking and tweaking until it works.
Sounds like a great process. I want to work with a dietitian.
It's an amazing process. This is why I think dietitians are so important.
Yeah, I agree.
And they're so important in this, they should be so important in the delivery of low carbohydrate diets, because they get an hour with their patients. Doctors don't get an hour with their
Absolutely
patients.
not.
So even
Especially not to talk about diet.
No. So even if you had a fantastic doctor who could do this, they just don't have the time. And I believe this process of medical nutrition therapy is key as well, because I don't think everyone should be given the same blanket low carb diet either. I think we all need our individual low carb diets. And I mean, like,
for those who need a low carb diet,
for those who need it.
Yes. It's quite possible for people to reverse diabetes on a high carbohydrate diet. I mean, the Kempner rice diet was that. It was white rice, white sugar, and fruit as much as you want to eat. And it reversed diabetes. It probably caused nutrient deficiencies down the road, but no more so than, say, a vegan diet. I mean, it's also going to be nutrient deficient. So,
well, well, on that note, what one thing I am finding, so I've been working in private practice now for about 6 or 7 months, so not a huge amount of time, but I always ask people about what their relationship with food is like. So every time I see them, I'm just like, are you enjoying your food? Like, what is that like? Yeah. And usually when they come in to see me, they have a love-hate relationship with food. They go through phases of just toxic, negative dieting, and then they go through phases of just loving food, splurging, overeating, but then having that associated guilt. Right. And so they really don't have a great relationship with food initially. And then just as a side effect, every single time they come in, they just seem a little bit brighter. And I'm always just like, so how's your relationship with food going? How's the quality of your life going? Because that's a very important thing. And people are just like, I just feel really good. And if you weren't going to ask them any of those questions about quality of life or their relationship with food, or even just how many times a day do you think about food? Because that's another big thing, especially for women or people that have done a lot of dieting. It's like every 2 seconds of the day, they're being consumed by numbers, calculations, what food choices they're going to make, and so on and so forth. And all of those things just naturally get better and better and better. And I notice that more so on people that are following low carbohydrate approaches than people who aren't. So, like, for me, that was a massive thing, you know, improving my relationship with food after following a more low carbohydrate diet. But it's something that I'm noticing in pretty much 100% of my patients. And if, for example, if someone came back and goes and said to me, I hate this food, doesn't taste good, then we would change the approach, because I think the patient's satisfaction and enjoyment is super important, and quality of life is so underestimated. I mean, I think when we look at the research, we're always looking at, did HbA1c improve? Did BMI improve? Did weight improve? But so many of these studies aren't asking, how is that person's quality of life? Is that getting better or worse? Because I would prioritize that as being one of the most important. And some people would even argue that quality of life is more important than, for example, their weight or HbA1c. And sometimes they have to outweigh, you know, do I want to be skinny and aesthetically pleasing, or do I want to have a really good quality of life and be a slightly chubbier person but healthy? Do you know what I mean? And so they weigh that out, and usually at the end of the day people say, I would rather have a good quality of life, because for some people getting to that ideal weight actually does require more strict approaches, where we sort of move away from quality of life and, you know, eat till you're satiated, stop when you're full. You have to be a bit more strict with some people, and then they start to realize, all this counting and all this fasting or whatever that they're forcing themselves to do isn't working in terms of their happiness and in their relationship with food. It's actually causing a negative balance.
Yeah, that's a really good way of looking at it. I mean, that's pretty much where I got to. I lost a lot of weight. I reversed my diabetes. I met all of my metabolic goals. But I'm still overweight, and I'm actually quite happy being overweight and one of the reasons is because it gives me excess adequate energy to be able to do stupid things like ride for 3 or 4 hours, you know, that kind of thing. So for me, you know, I've prioritized my life to the point where I wanted to get metabolically healthy, but then I really don't care about being bikini ready.
Exactly.
Because I look stupid in a bikini. So, you know.
But that's the thing, like, people, like, we talk about eating disorders as being like this sort of like, we just think of anorexia and bulimia and those types of things. But people who have spent 20 years trying to lose weight and going through that negative calorie deficit, they are on that eating disorder spectrum.
Sure.
And so basically,
even if they're bodybuilders, I mean, they're still on it's an eating disorder there. Yeah.
And so they'll usually, you know, come in when they're in their mid-40s or whatever, and they'll have gained so much weight, and they'll say, I want to be 60 kilos again, or whatever that is. But then they get to, say, 80 or whatever, and they realize that, okay, 80 is where my body is healthy and I'm happy and I can eat what I want and not measure things. But then if I'm going to push down to get to 75 or get to 60, I have to start that sort of eating disorder sort of tendencies come back, and they have to start weighing their food again, measuring their food again, counting their calories and those types of things. And that then becomes very negative for that person. Yeah. So for me, for example, if I really wanted, I could lose 5 kilos, but I choose not to, because then that starts to like tap into my quality of life and reduce my quality of life. Yeah. And a lot of those eating disorder tendencies come back for me. So I start thinking about food all the time. I start feeling like I'm going to lose control if I see something I like. Right. And all those feelings make me not happy, essentially. Yeah. And I'm so happy where I am, being able to not weigh and measure things. And that's really where I, as a dietitian, want to help people to get. Yeah. So how healthy can you be, but how happy can you be and how
And
fulfilled
it
is
must
your
be
life?
part of the calculus. I mean, the happiness must be part of the calculus. And for some people, happiness is more important than a bikini body, and for other people, it's the other way around. But it's your own personal calculus. So
exactly,
that's really good.
Yeah. So in our systematic review that we did, we actually included quality of life as an outcome.
Okay.
None of the studies reported on quality of life. So we were like, okay, if they reported on it, we're going to collect it and see what happened to their quality of life. No one reported on it. And we said, that's the problem. That's a massive problem.
Yeah.
Because, as we're saying, you can't just assume their life is, rainbows and butterflies when their HbA1c is 5.
Right.
You would think that, but you can't assume. So I hope future studies are looking at quality of life as well. And part of my PhD, I am planning to go over to Perth, where they have the Type 1 Telethon Family Centre.
Beck Johnson, we interviewed her on the podcast.
Yep. And talk to some of their patients who have type 1 diabetes doing a low-carb diet, and just sit down with them and just chat about quality of life. So has it improved with improved management?
Nice.
And has it, just how's their relationship with food? And things like that, because there's a group of people out there who believe that these really tightly controlled type 1 diabetics are very comparable with someone who's got anorexia, for example. So the weighing and measuring of your food and wanting to have a glucose that's perfect all day, every day. Some people are saying, oh, that's an eating disorder. But I mean, this is why I want to explore it. Because I want to say, find out from these people that are actually doing that, is your relationship better or worse with food? How many times a day are you thinking about it? And what sort of foods are you eating? And, but what was your relationship with food before you went low carb and had this tight control? Because from my understanding of people with type 1 diabetes, food is a nightmare for them, generally, particularly if they're eating a high carbohydrate diet, because they've got to eat something, then their blood glucose goes crazy through the roof, or it goes too low depending on how much insulin they've taken, and then 2 hours later they've got to try and eat again and take more insulin.
With glucose to deal with the insulin. They just talk to medicate for glucose.
They're on this crazy food insulin roller coaster every single day, and their relationship with food is not good.
Right.
And that's something I've just observed. And so I really, really want to test that as part of my PhD. So that's sort of like a side project with that as well. But there's all these things we need to consider. And I think these are things dietitians are thinking about and health practitioners are thinking about. And the more we talk about it and get those health practitioners in the conversation, whether they're pro low carb or anti low carb, I think we need everyone's thoughts and opinions on this topic so that we can really help to improve people's lives. Because for you, you're an amazing example. This was a fantastic tool for you to help you improve your health and basically reverse type 2 diabetes. So how can
10
we...
toes. That's my biomarker.
So how can we just not give this tool to people when it's done amazing things for people like you and for thousands of people out there? We can't just pretend it doesn't exist. We have to start working with it. And I really hope that more dietitians get involved.
Fascinating line of inquiry, especially about the quality of life. I'm very excited to see what you do with your research dollars. Interesting, if you want to hear Jessica talk about this, she's going to be speaking at Ketofest Down Under, which is happening in Canberra on September the 16th at the National Press Club. And she's very excited.
I'm so excited. I'm doing a little happy dance right now.
We're both doing the happy dance. Because I've just come back from Ketofest in America, and it was a fantastic experience. And people, when we announced in America that we were doing a Canberra conference, I had over a dozen people came up to me afterwards and said, these are Americans, saying, I wish you gave me more time so that I could actually organise a trip to Australia to go to Ketofest. And I'm like, you've just been to Ketofest, but their experience was so great.
They loved it.
Going to it. So anyway, we're going to do Ketofest in Canberra on September the 16th, and we're going to put all of the profits that come from doing Ketofest, we're going to basically donate to Sydney University, where Jessica is from, in the name of the ketogenic community of Australia, and it will be earmarked for low carb research. Basically, Kieran Rooney's Kieran Rooney stuff. So it may not be a lot of money. It depends on whether people donate to the cause. But so we're really keen to support the science you're doing, especially this idea of putting together protocols for dietitians to be able to safely and comfortably do low-carb diet.
Yeah, and we're so appreciative of that as well, because it costs so much to do research. And, Kieran Rooney at the University of Sydney has a bunch of really passionate PhD students at the moment, and we're all here at Low Carb Threadbow, but we're all trying to, just improve the health of people out there living with these chronic conditions. We're all looking at different areas of low carbohydrate diets. And I believe this is something people do like to get involved in. And, they always want to know how they can help. So it's really amazing to hear that you and Carl are doing that for us.
Yeah, happy to.
But the other thing I want to quickly say about Ketofest in Canberra is I think this is going to be an amazing opportunity, because I know the people that listen to your show are pretty much like already, low carb converted, keto converted. So if you have someone in your life who is not low carb converted or keto converted, who may be interested or who may benefit from it, bring them to Ketofest in Canberra, because this has to be like one of the best ways to just teach people who want to learn about this type of diet. We love having people that are already converted, of course, but it's just about spreading this message, I think, a little bit wider now. So if there's any health practitioners listening,
bring your dietitian, come to Canberra,
bring your dietitian, please bring your dietitian. So if there's any health practitioners listening that are just like, oh, I don't know about this, then that's totally fine. You can have an alternative opinion, that's fine, but just come to Ketofest, learn a little bit about the science, and ask us questions, and we can have a healthy discussion about this. Because we're always going to have people with different opinions, and I think that's a good thing.
I think it's
particularly
a great thing,
with nutrition. And so that's going to actually help this area improve more, and that's how we're going to help improve more lives. And I'm hoping to bring as much of my family and friends as I can. I'm sort of joking to Richard about organizing a busload of people. So if you want to come on my bus, let me know.
It'll be the party bus.
The party bus. Yeah. So I'm really excited, and thank you to you guys for organizing that.
Well, thank you very much, Jessica. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. We're looking forward to hearing from you at Ketofest. That'll be recorded. It'll be online afterwards. So thank you very much for that.
Amazing. I can't wait.
Heard you say you're due for a little.
Yeah, thanks, Jess. That was awesome. That was a great interview. We're going to actually hear Jessica speak at Ketofest Down Under on Sunday, September the 16th at the National Press Club in Canberra.
Yes.
And you'll be there. Well, if we sell enough tickets, you'll be there.
Yeah, my first time to Canberra.
Yeah, nice.
And I'm feeling a little peckish. You?
Yeah, I'm a little bit hungry. What? I think it's time for some recipes. What you got, Carl?
Well, I told you I was going to make picanha, and I did.
Yeah, and you left me with a massive cliffhanger. So what was the result?
Well, okay, so the result is that when I fired up my Traeger grill, when I was putting it together, I was noticing, hey, there's no direct heat here. It's all indirect heat.
Right.
Which is kind of what you need if you have a smoker.
Yeah.
And on the other side, on the high side, you're basically baking, at 450 degrees. And you and I know that the Maillard reaction is really important when you have a steak. You want to sear on that steak.
Yeah, you want it crispy on the outside and go caramelized.
Exactly. And you don't get that from an oven when you bake. So unless, you're going to really bake it at low temperatures over long periods of time, then it happens. But so I decided that I was going to do this picanha in the oven.
Right.
And broil it.
Okay.
Mixed results. So first of all, what is picanha? Picanha is a rump cap. Now, if you've ever been to a churrascaria like Fogo de Chao or Texas de Brazil, you probably remember what they call top sirloin.
Sure.
Yeah, so it's usually curved around on a skewer, and there's a nice fat cap around the outside. So it's kind of like a half moon shape.
Yeah.
And it's also known as the rump cap. It's skewered, salted, and grilled over an intense heat, just enough to cook the outside layer. And then you cut off the outside layer, which is, nice on the outside. And by the time you get inside, it's medium rare, maybe even rare.
Yeah. And
then you cut it thin, you resalt it, you re-grill, and you repeat. So you probably have to hunt around for a butcher who gets it. I had to send my butcher to a Wikipedia page. So the way they do it at a churrascaria is over a charcoal flame. Right? They have really hot coals and they rotate it over this fire, and that's really good. But if you're like me and most other people, if you don't have a charcoal grill, that can be challenging.
Yeah.
So what I did is I put it under the broiler, and I got some rock salt and put that over it. And when I say rock salt, I mean rock salt, like really big grains of salt, not just flakes.
Big old crystals, yeah.
Yeah, big crystals. So the first time it goes under the broiler, it's only going to be a few minutes, and then that outer layer is going to be cooked, and you want to turn it over after a few minutes and do the outside layer. But then here's the thing. Take it off the pan. Move it to another place to rest. And also, I wouldn't expect that you'll be able to find the steaks, the skewers that will hold that meat on.
Right.
It's really hard to find. And if you just have these little thin barbecue skewers that you get, in the store or whatever around here in the States, it's just going to slide right off. So you may want to forego the skewers altogether and just use some tongs and a knife to cut the outside layer. Now, the first time you do that, the outside layer is perfect. It's perfect. But if you put it back in, resalt it, and rebroil it, you really got to watch the temperature because it isn't going to take long before that thing turns to gray.
Right. Yeah, gray meat's no good. No bueno.
No, it's not. It's tough and it's nasty, and it's better to err on the side of rare than on the side of medium or even well done. So I made that mistake. So the first round was great. Some people loved it. Some people said, it's too rare for me. Put it back in. Once you put it back in, you really just have to be careful because it's already hot now and it's going to cook through in no time. So I'm going to try this again this week, but this time I'm just going to pan sear.
Right.
I'm just going to put the rock salt on it. I'm going to put it in cast iron. I'm just going to sear it on each side for 2 minutes. Get that nice crisp crust that doesn't affect the rest of it as much, and try it that way.
Nice.
And I'll let you know what happens.
Yeah. Look forward to hearing about that.
But it is the most delicious steak. The thing is with picanha is when you cut it, you want to cut it against the grain into strips that are about 2 inches wide. And then you sort of fold it over with a fat cap on the outside, and then skewer it. Cover it with salt, cook it. Meat, salt, heat.
Easy.
Yum.
Yum. We actually went to a churrascaria in Thredbo, and I ate over a kilogram of meat. And I normally don't eat a lot of protein, but, I had about 300 grams of protein, I think, in a kilo of meat, probably.
Wow.
And it was, and I tell you what, I experienced gout in all of my joints, especially my big toe, for like 3 days after that event. And it's just the meat. Wow. It's just that, I was dealing with so many purines from that meat. And gout, if you've ever had gout, you don't make jokes about it because it is not fun at all. But, that's the thing. It's my body's not used to dealing with a lot of protein. And, you can do bursts of having, 300 grams of protein in a day if you want to, and if your body can handle the sudden influx of protein, but it's not something you want to do every day. That's for sure.
Well, was it worth it?
Oh, yeah. It was totally worth it. It was totally worth it. And the skiing the next day was just outstanding. And I had skiing in a meat coma with gout. It was totally worth it.
Awesome. Bring it on. All right, man. That's my recipe. What do you got?
So I've got one. This is a simple one. I'm kind of punting because I'm working so hard on Ketofest Down Under, so I didn't have a lot of time to cook. Next week, I'm actually going to do a day with Chef Darren Tetley from the National Press Club, and we're just going to have a play in the kitchen, so we're going to try some experiments.
Sounds good.
We're doing some interesting stuff with duck fat. So anyway, that's all I'm going to say.
Ooh.
But today, I'm actually going to give you a recipe that I came up with, and this is funny. Have you ever had baby bells? They're like
Baby Bell mushrooms?
No, Baby Bell cheese. It's like a little...
yeah.
Little
Sure.
Edam cheese in a wax wrapper. And and so Baby Bells in Australia at Costco lately have been shipping... You buy them in a bag of Baby Bells, like maybe 20 Baby Bells, and in the bags these days they've been shipping these little plastic dishes. And I thought, that's very interesting. And I learned that I've been eating Baby Bells all wrong. These plastic dishes are for microwaving Baby Bells, and you basically put you unwrap the Baby Bell it's like an Edam cheese, and you unwrap it from its wax, and you put it in a little plastic container. You put it in a microwave for 30 seconds, and what comes out is like fondue. It's just incredible. It's like elevating Baby Bells to the next level. But that's not my recipe.
Wow, I love
that's not my recipe. That's just my inspiration.
Okay.
So here's my recipe. Get a ramekin. A ramekin is a little ceramic dish. It's you normally have like a little souffle in it, or little berries and cream in it. Get 2 ramekins and put in the bottom of the ramekin about 5 grams worth of cheese. I use a cheddar, and I just use a slice of cheese. What you're going to do is you're going to nuke these. You're going to put them in the microwave for a minute. These 2 ramekins. And what they're going to do is they're going to cook the fats in the cheese. It's going to bubble up it'll be like the surface of the moon with all these pockmarks all on it. And eventually you'll think it's gone too far. You'll think the cheese has gone too far and started to dry out and burn. But it gets a really nice colour to it, lovely golden colour. When the ramekin comes out, the cheese is going to be stuck to the bottom of the ramekin, and you'll be thinking, what an absolute disaster. Grab a teaspoon, prise the corner of that cheese up, and you'll find it pops off into a little disc. Put it on a rack just to cool down for a little bit, and you have a lovely little cheese crisp that you can cover with Vegemite. You can put some sour cream, put some guacamole on it. It's basically a little cheese crisp cooked in a ramekin about a minute in the microwave.
I've done the same with provolone slices because they make nice crackers. You put a provolone slice in the microwave for about a minute and a half, and that's exactly what happens. It turns into this crispy little cracker. Nice.
Well, anyway, there's a quick little trick. If somebody's coming over and you need to make some crackers and you've got some lovely dip, there you go. You can make cheese crisps very quickly in the microwave just with a couple of ramekins.
Awesome. Well, that was a great show, Richard.
Yeah.
Jam-packed full of nutritional value.
Absolutely. Of course, if you have anything you want to tell us, something we said wrong, something that you don't agree with, some more research you found to support or refute, anything that we've said, send it by email to dudes@2ketodudes.com or post it on our website.
And you can follow us on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, and Instagram at 2ketodudes. Make sure to use the hashtag 2ketodudes.
And of course, if you want to join the free ketogenic forum, it's forum.2keto.com. And you can also have a look around the ketogenic forums without needing to create an account by starting with success.2keto.com.
And if useless swag is your fancy, t-shirts, coffee mugs, and other junk with witty keto sayings on them, head over to gear.2keto.com.
And if you want a shot at getting some of that swag for free, join the 2 Keto Dudes fan club. You'll be eligible to win something in every show. Go to fanclub.2keto.com.
And if you feel like supporting our forums and all the podcasts we produce, think about making a monthly pledge on our Patreon page at patreon.2keto.com.
You can also see all of our podcasts and other videos on YouTube at youtube.2keto.com.
And if you haven't already, go leave a review on Apple Podcasts. That's how new people get to know about what we do. 2 Keto Dudes is brought to you by 2 Keto LLC, who strives to support the low-carb community with podcasts and other publications. Well, Richard, keep calm, keto on, and fast when you can.
Yeah, Carl. Keep calm, keto on, and Ketofest in Australia at least once a year.
All right, we'll see you next time on 2 Keto Dudes.